Hey everyone, welcome to the channel for another Escape From Tarkov video. In this one, I'm continuing my series covering some of the top weapon builds you can build from the traders at certain levels, this time going over levels 10 to 20. With the upcoming flea market changes in the 12.6 patch that will make only found in raid items available on the flea market, building weapons purely from the traders is going to be more important than ever, since players won't be able to easily pick up high-level attachments on the market anymore. While some attachments with high drop rates will still be searchable on the market, and I'll be sure to point those out if I go over them in the builds, trader unlocks are going to be more important than ever pretty soon, and it seems I started this series at just the right time. This video will be featuring 4 different budget-focused weapon setups, because even at levels 1 to 20, the budget build options you have are fairly simple. To avoid making this a 20-minute video though, I'll be following this one up with another set of builds for level 10 to 20, focusing on 3 more complex and high-end builds you can set up at these levels. Future videos in this series will also likely be split into 2 parts, one for budget builds and one for more high-end setups. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some weapon builds you can make between levels 10 and 20, where you start getting level 2 traders unlocked across the board. Most of the level 2 traders are unlocked at level 15 though, so these builds are more like level 15 to 20. To start this one off, I'll be going over a simple AK build that adds a basic sight, foregrip, and compensator to cut down on the recoil without blowing up the cost too much. This build isn't going to get you laser accurate recoil control, but it brings down the stock recoil significantly and lets you mount most basic red dot sights onto your AK. This build works with pretty much any type of AK as well, with minimal changes required. I'll be going over the stats for the 545 AKs, and the 762 AKs will generally have much higher recoil. First, at lower levels, the only upgraded compensator you can really get is the DTK-I compensator at skier level 2. It's not the best, but for a cheap price, it gets you some pretty decent recoil control. This compensator fits onto AK-74s without any adapters, but for 762 AKMs, you just need the TT-AKM adapter at skier level 2 to add this to any AKM rifle. Next up, I replaced the handguard with the POLYMER AK-100 handguard, which is dirt cheap at proper level 1 and lets you add a foregrip and flashlight or laser. At this level, the max recoil reduction you can get is from the RK1 foregrip at skier level 2, which is kind of expensive at 17,000 rubles. You have a few other options though. The Tango down grip gives you much less recoil control but is very cheap, and the RVG at Peacekeeper level 3 is a much more cost-effective foregrip if you're on a budget. However, you'll have to be level 18 and have completed some Peacekeeper quests to unlock this one. At proper level 2, you get a very useful item for AKs, the TTOI rear sight adapter that lets you add red dot sights onto your AK with a very low profile mount. For this build, I just went with the PK06 from Jaeger level 1, but you can use other sights like the Fastfire or DELTAPOINT as well. If you don't have proper level 2 unlocked, you can use the Cobra dovetail sight on AKs with a dovetail mount, or you can swap to the CAA RS47 handguard at Peacekeeper level 2 and run your red dot sight on your handguard instead. This adds some cost to your build, but it also gives you some extra stats, so it's worth it at the end of the day. Finally, the last part on this build is the GP25 butt pad for AKs, which fits onto the basic stock and adds a nice bit of recoil reduction for a very cheap price. I would also recommend swapping the wooden stock with the black polymer stock at proper level 1. It adds 1% of extra recoil control and is very cheap if you sell off the old wooden stock as well. For the overall stats on this build, it comes out to 72 recoil with the RK1 grip, or around 74 recoil if you go for the cheaper foregrips that I mentioned, with around 50 ergonomics depending on your foregrip choice. The total cost on this setup is between 70 to 80,000 rubles if you purchase your rifle from the traders, but if you can find the rifle on the market or loot it in the raid, it'll bring your cost down quite a bit. This build is pretty simple, but it's also a workhorse and can very much get the job done as long as you pace your shots and keep your sprays controlled. For the second build in this video, I want to talk about the VEPR Hunter, one of the most powerful early game weapons in terms of raw damage and penetration. The Hunter has become a favorite of Tarkov's rat community because it's cost effective, good at PvP, and almost never gets looted, coming back through insurance over and over again. You can buy this thing from Jaeger level 2 at level 15, or alternatively, you can buy it on the market or loot one from scavs pretty easily. That being said, it's also one of the most simple weapons in the game to set up and get running, since the only attachment you can really add right now is a sight until the suppressor gets added in a future patch. You only really have a few options for your choice of sight on this rifle, regardless of your level though. If you want to run it with just a red dot, you can add the TTOI rear sight adapter I mentioned in the last AK build, which lets you add most red dot sights onto the Hunter. hunter. This one is cheap and lets you use your favorite red dot sight. You can also add either of the dovetail reflex sights to this thing, the OKP7 or the Cobra reflex sight if you prefer those or find them in the raid. The second main option for an optic on the hunter is the trusty 4x PSO scope, which gives you some magnification to use the hunter in more of a DMR role. The hunter is one of the first 7.62x51 rifles you can get your hands on, so this scope can actually be a great option for bigger maps if you want to creep around and one-tap people from range. When it's all added up, the total cost on this build from the traders is going to be around 60,000 rubles, regardless of which optic you use on it. This rifle gets a lot of hate simply because it's cost effective and can drop kitted players really easy, but it's also an amazing equalizer in the Tarkov world and lets low-level players compete with pretty much anyone as long as they're accurate with their shots. Just load up on 10-round mags from the flea market or from dead scavs, buy some M80 rounds at Peacekeeper level 2, and you'll definitely have some fun with this thing. Next up, I want to take another look at the SKS, a staple weapon of the early game in Escape from Tarkov that gets a ton of new mods, including detachable 20-round mags, as soon as you hit level 15 and get some level 2 traders unlocked. The basic SKS has very limited options for modding, but if you get Jaeger level 2 and pick up the OP SKS, it comes with a dovetail mount for scopes, and that makes all the difference when setting this thing up. With a dovetail mounted optic and a backup sight on the front rail, the SKS becomes an extremely versatile rifle that works well at close range and medium range. It fires a great round for early game PvP, and it can be suppressed pretty easily as well. To start the build off, just head over to proper level 1 or 2 and buy yourself a PSO 4x scope and slot that onto the dovetail rail. There's a few different options for this scope, but the only real difference is the reticle type. Next, at Jaeger level 2, you can pick up the SOCOM rail mount for the SKS, which lets you add a backup sight as well as a flashlight or laser if you want. After attaching this, you can buy an MPR 45 angled mount at Peacekeeper level 2, and then attach a small red dot sight to this mount. I like the DELTAPOINT for my canted sights, so I picked that up plus its mount from Peacekeeper level 2. That's pretty much it for the core of this build. It's extremely simple, but it gives you a lot of options when fighting, and it's a great mid-range weapon in the mid-game. You can also suppress the SKS with the Hexagon SKS suppressor, which can generally be found on the flea market for under 30,000 rubles, and it's a pretty common drop in the raid. You can also buy the weapon tuning SKS thread adapter from Jaeger level 2, and then attach the DTK-I compensator from Skier level 2 to your SKS to gain a little bit of recoil control. The stats on this build are 149 recoil and 32 ergonomics, which are definitely nothing to write home about. For the total price, you're looking at around 80,000 rubles, or about 110,000 rubles if you add the suppressor from the flea market. For the last build in this video, I'll be taking a look at a very simple but surprisingly effective M1A setup that you can make as soon as you hit level 20 and get Mechanic 2 unlocked. It might sound crazy to suggest the M1A is a viable weapon for lower levels, since a straight up purchase of this thing is pretty expensive and it has a reputation as a powerful endgame weapon. However, you can get a hold of the M1A for a pretty cheap price if you take advantage of the barter trade at Peacekeeper level 3, which lets you trade 8 USB adapters for a stock M1A. These adapters are extremely common to find and can be purchased on the flea market at a good price because of this. Once you make this trade, there isn't really a lot of extra stuff that needs to be added to the build, just a pair of sights that turn this thing into a nice little DMR with a backup reflex sight. First up, you need to get the ARMS number 18 mount for Mechanic level 2. Which lets you add full-size scopes to the M1A. If you don't have this unlocked, you're pretty much stuck with just running a red dot sight on the mount that comes with the M1A. Next, at Jaeger level 1, you can pick up the UTG 25mm mount rings and the PILAD 4x rifle scope. Add both of these onto your M1A, and you now have a nice 4x scope that's great for sniping. For the backup sight, I use the same combo from the SKS build, an MPR 45 angled mount, and then a DELTAPOINT reflex sight added on top of that. You'll only be able to get 20 round mags at this level, but even so, that's double the mag capacity of the VEPR Hunter, and you can get hybrid optics onto this build. The stats on this one come out to 146 recoil and 35 ergonomics, with a total build cost of between 60 and 70,000 rubles, depending on the price of USB adapters on the flea market. I fully intend to make this M1A build my go-to setup once I hit level 20 in the next wipe, because it completely destroys pretty much any armor players will have in the mid game, and is great at both close and long range. Well, that pretty much covers it for these level 10 to 20 builds. I focused on budget setups under 100k in this video, and I'll be following this up with a second part which looks at some more high-end setups that you build between level 10 and 20. And believe it or not, there is a few fully kitted builds that you can make at this level. The new flea market changes are going to really change up what people have access to in the mid game before you have all the traders unlocked. So I hope these videos covering builds by level can help you figure out what you can put together depending on what traders you have unlocked. I'll be streaming more Escape from Tarkov on Twitch, and it'd be great to have you drop by the stream, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. There's also links to my Twitter and Discord down below, which I use to send out notifications when I'm going live. Finally, there's a link to my Patreon page as well, and if you want to be an absolute beauty and support the channel, consider checking that out. It lets me commit more time to the channel and keep the content coming. Thanks for checking out the video. As always, feel free to leave any comments, corrections, or suggestions down below, and until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.